I have somebody very special with us today. Sam Hurley and I met actually through his Instagram page, and I started reading his poetry, and I was incredibly moved by it. I think it's very timely. I think it's very appropriate. And Sam, I wanted to talk to you, and you graciously said hello. So I welcome you to OWC Radio.
So currently I'm in Lancashire, England. That's where I live in the valley here. I'm a father and a poet. I spend a lot of my time raising my kids in the wild forests and hills here. At the moment, I've just finished putting together a poetry collection, which is a collection of poetry. Sort of over the past, I'd say 5 to 6 years, but I've been writing longer than that. And at the moment, I'm quite lucky that I'm doing this full time. So I'm living the poetry at the moment, and that's a real joy. That's a real privilege, and a dream of mine since a child. So you could say I'm living the dream, if there is such a thing for a poet.
I think that you are. Tell us the name of the book and where we can buy it.
It's called An Anthem for the Dreaming Lost.
Publishing a book is difficult. Who's the publisher? How are you getting this out there for us? And where can we buy it?
So I'm self-publishing it. I began to go down the routes of finding an agent, and I've got a contact an agency. And I suppose putting the book together began about 8-9 months ago, sort of when my work started to get picked up on Instagram and people started to pay attention. And I've been doing this for 15 years, and for whatever reason, 8-9 months ago, it just seemed to take hold more than it had in the past. And people were asking me for a book. And my decision was, right, well, I'll put something out quickly because I can jump on the sudden interest in my work. And it's not been quick. So it might have been better to have gone down that publisher's route. But I've been able to control the creative output, for better or worse. So I'm fully responsible whether people like it or not. But it will be available on Amazon globally.
That's awesome. Well, we'll be sure to look for it. I really do encourage people to buy the book and take it off into a reading corner and spend a moment with it if you can. And I think you're really going to enjoy it. So let's go back to you as a child. Your book actually starts with you as a 5-year-old.
Yes, yeah, it does, yeah.
Who was Honey, by the way? Was that your dog or?
So I had a rabbit called Honey because she smelled of honey.
Oh, a rabbit.
Yeah. I remember naming her because her fur smelled sweet like hay, and she got the name Honey. So the first poem in that book is about that rabbit and about losing the rabbit, but it's also probably the first moment in my life where I realized that there's a power and a magic to writing. I'm not someone who I can appear extroverted, but I'm an introvert, and I don't always find it I find it quite difficult sometimes to express maybe how I feel vocally. I certainly did as a child, and that poem, when my rabbit dies, and my dad was a big proponent of magic and wonder and folklore, and he created this story of these fairies in the tree, and for me that was the bridge of I could write to my rabbit through this magical portal. And obviously it was my dad writing these letters, but for me that point was probably where I began to fall in love with the written word, and become a poet.
Your first poem was about loss. You were 5 years old, and it helped you find your voice. It's amazing that I really believe, and I often ask people this, what did you want to be when you were 5 years old? And I literally say 5 years old. So I think it's ironic that the first poem in your book is you as a 5-year-old boy. I believe that we are given gifts in our life,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of us look back on our lives. I hate to admit this, but I flipped to the last few pages of the book, and you made me cry. Damn it.
Mm-hmm.
You made me cry because it was so amazing. And I think the reason I'm talking about this is I think that you do that for people in an age when we are separated by technology. Technology is supposed to bring us together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Supposedly, yeah.
the poem that you wrote that caught my eye first was AI and the Poet. Can you talk
Mm-hmm.
about that one?
Yeah. So I think like lots of people, I have a love-hate relationship with technology, and I think about lots of people at the moment. We're looking out, and we're looking at this AI revolution. We're looking at something that's going to come and completely revolutionize our lives and change the way we interact with almost everything and alter almost everything we do. And it seems to have come out of nowhere. It hasn't. It's there's been touches of it. I can remember the paperclip on Microsoft Word that you could ask it advice like this. We've seen little hints of this, but all of a sudden it seems to have come in and taken over the conversation of the future and where we're heading as a species. And it's going to be AI. Everything's going to be digitized and I suppose thrown into that the digital hands of a computer. And the reaction to that came from mostly having creative friends like yourself and seeing them become either disenchanted. I had a friend who was writing a book and sort of was like he had tried chat GTP, and it was like, oh, I asked it to write some sentences. I asked it to write he was writing a fantasy novel. I asked it to write a fantasy novel, and it came back and wrote this thing with all these battles and details, and it was actually quite good. So what's the point? And I also have friends who are reliant on this gig economy, people who are voiceover artists, people who are musicians and painters and book illustrators, and all of a sudden this new character enters the game, and it is potentially going to take away those small things that artists and creatives thrive upon, that need to survive and sustain. And my worry is that we forget that what art is and the reason for art, and that is that beneath it's humanity. It's a human connection. We want to dig into that second skin of life. We want to find meaning, and I don't think I can't imagine any circumstance apart from maybe morbid curiosity that I would read a novel written by a computer. I want to know. I read Wordsworth's Lucy poems about his daughter dying, and I weep because I know that was a human experience. I don't think I'd feel the same if a computer. I think I'd feel tricked, and maybe mortified if a computer or if a algorithm was writing that type of stuff and someone was passing that off as authentic human experience. So for me, I suppose it was a rally that art isn't going anywhere because a computer, a algorithm, an artificial intelligence hasn't the empathy or the ability to connect in a human way, so it can't really produce what any poet, any artist, a 5-year, to me, a poem that a 4-year-old, 5-year-old has written is far more meaningful than some Keatsian or Shakespearean prose that a computer's written, because it comes from a real place, a tangible place that I don't think machines can do, but I certainly don't think we should allow machines to do that or get to a point where they have a consciousness, because I don't think we understand what a consciousness is. So before we give it away as a gift, maybe we should learn what it is to be human before we give it to something that isn't.
I agree. You used a term to describe AI in the poem. I believe it was in the poem that I will never forget. And you called it a psychopath
Yeah.
because it had no feeling. It had no remorse.
Mm-hmm.
It had no soul.
Mm-hmm.
And that so deeply touched me. And you mentioned a moment ago, true poetry, and you have another poem about, and I thought this was an indication of who you are as a person too,
Mm-hmm.
because you are so talented. You have an ability to find meaning and tie meaning to things that we as mere mortals would not think to describe that way. But you give credit to the people who are writing on post-its and to the people who are writing cards to those that they love.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me shows that you appreciate humans and you appreciate other people's hearts. And I think that's what resonates with people with your
Mm-hmm.
poetry. I watch the comments that you get on Instagram, and everybody, you should go to Samuel Hurley. And Samuel, it's just your name, Samuel Hurley, right?
Yes, my
What's the
name.
address on Instagram?
Yeah,
Right.
it's Samuel
Just go
dot
to
Samuel
Samuel
dot
Hurley on Instagram. Yeah, it's really sweet the way you treat your people that have read your work,
Mm-hmm.
and I know they appreciate it. And that's as you become more and more a celebrity now that you're an overnight sensation after 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, you are going to become a celebrity, and so how are you going to protect that strong but yet still delicate heart?
Yeah, I mean, I hope I don't become a celebrity. I'm not. I have a little bit of a following on Instagram. There's a part of me that hopes that doesn't happen, which is strange because I'm almost tempting the beast by every time I put something out there. Um, I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say I'm potentially someone who has the natural makeup of someone who can do well as a celebrity, as someone who's famous. I live I'm an introvert. I live a private life. I just really like to write poetry, and I really like to make little poetry videos. And for 15 years, it's been my little secret. It's been my own paradise. And I think you mentioned about people's reaction. I have young writers messaging me or people saying, "Oh, this has really helped me through something." I've recently lost someone, and your poem touched me, and I think that's the reason why I'm still doing it. Because when one of my poems first went viral, if I can use that term, we're not talking tens of millions of views, but certainly much more than I was used to. My instinct was to delete my account. It was to back away from that. It does make me feel very uncomfortable. But knowing that actually, one, I can maybe make a living doing this, and two, maybe I can make a difference and maybe help some people along the way. I think that's what I would have to hold on to should another poem go viral. And I'm cast off into the algorithm or into fame.
I think that many artists have the desire to just put their work in a closet and not
Yeah,
show it to anybody. And I think you're very brave, especially with the kind of work that you're doing to put it out there for people. But like you said, you are helping a lot of people. And especially at this day and age when there are so many people struggling with anxiety and fear and hurt. And, we want to bring hope to the world, right?
yeah. Well,
And I think
certainly,
that you
yeah.
do that. I mean, if you could describe your poetry in just a few words, how would you describe it?
Um, I think I write about the human moment, but I think I also write about or try and connect people to their sense of wonder again. That like you say, I think we live in quite a disenchanted time, and I think for me, poetry, art, music, has always been that connection to meaning. and connection to something deeper, and to joy. And certainly, my book deals a lot with existentialism, disenchantment, but then refinding wonder through sort of maybe taking a step back and going, I didn't always used to feel this way. And I didn't, I used to walk through these fields and feel something. I used to look at a tree and feel amazed or astonished. And part of that's novelty, but I do think that we can reconnect. We can take a step back and go, there was a part of me that maybe I left in childhood. And I'm not talking about childish behaviour, I'm talking about childlike wonder that maybe we should have brought through with us into our adult life, instead of leaving it there in the past. Because I think without it, we become a bit lost, and all of a sudden we start going, well, what is the point? What is the point in all of this? And then when you throw technology in there, that sort of, in many ways, is wonderful and connects us, it can also cheapen and remove meaning from the meaningful things and connections that we have. So yeah, I'd say, I don't know if I've answered that question in a succinct way, but I would say, my poetry deals with wonder, romanticism, and a lot of romance too. I write a lot of romance poems, but it's all interlinked into that sense of that there is magic in the world.
I agree with that. There is. And I think a lot of people agree with you. Talk to me about your family life growing up, your parents and what they did and where you were.
Yeah, so on one hand, a typically working class northern English childhood, and then on the other side, my dad was a clown and an illustrator. So, and we didn't really have. I mean, there's no money in clowning, and that's not changed. You don't find rich clowns, so there was never really any money. So my childhood we were always outdoors. I mean, this was pre-internet anyway. So it was all about story. It was all about myth. It was all about passing the time and finding things to do. And certainly having a dad who was a clown and a performer, and someone who works quite literally with magic and wonder, shaped my journey, and feel very fortunate for that. And my mum was a psych nurse, so she was the sort of rational, sensible person in the household. And I grew up with I was lucky to have two brothers as well who were my best friends, and I think I was quite fortunate. I look back and I'm very grateful for my childhood, even though we didn't have computers, we didn't have smartphones, we had one holiday when we were kids. We didn't have fancy things, but I wouldn't trade my childhood with anyone else's.
Me either. And I think that what you had are the things that are most important. Yeah. So I'm assuming your parents supported you with your writing. Do you still have them? Are they still with you?
Yeah. So my dad certainly did. He was the one who, in that first poem where I talk about writing something from the heart and finding that connection with the things that you feel inside, to putting it into words. It was him who always encouraged the creative side. And as a child, because I trained to be an actor, I did done lots of creative things, not just poetry, throughout my life. And my dad was a massive champion of that. And my mum, although she worked a normal job because someone had to, has always been really supportive, in a different way than my dad. But then, about 12 years old, my dad just decided he didn't want to be part of the family anymore, and just left, which is really strange. So he's not. I don't think he's even aware of what I do. And yeah, but it's strange because I don't feel don't feel resentment in that way. I just feel like there's two different men there. There's the father of my childhood who is my hero, almost this mythical man who provided this almost like fairy tale upbringing, and then I think he decided he wanted to be someone else for whatever reason.
And do your children know their father's a writer? What did they say about it? Obviously, they're not going to be, I mean, they could read your writing, but I doubt that they would even understand it. I don't know how old they are. But
No.
what did they say? Dad, you're a writer.
It's funny. I mean, my youngest is 1 year old, and my eldest is 3.
Oh.
Well, almost 4. So they don't fully.
Oh, so they can't read yet.
No, they can't read yet. But I do read to them, and I do the things that my dad did for me. So I reinvent fairy tale for them, and we go off into the woods, and I encourage them to interact with nature in a magical, meaningful way. And at Christmas, it's I encourage them to. So my 3-year-old, he's brilliant. He's got such a, as all 3-year-olds do, a vivid imagination. And what we do at bedtime is we'll read one book. So we'll read like The Gruffalo or whatever, and then we'll get into bed, and then I make him tell me the story. So he creates a story for me, and they're all like absurd and about volcanoes and dinosaurs and spaceships and all sorts, but they're brilliant. So I encourage that, the power of storytelling, the power of imagination in my kids now, because I think this is the time to do it. And I hope that they
absolutely
look back like I look back and go, I was lucky my dad did this for us. I hope.
Yeah, it was very sweet that he wrote the letter from Honey to let you guys know that Honey had 3 carrots that morning.
Yeah,
that was sweet. We used to when I was driving the car to drop my children off at daycare when I worked at the studio, we would sing songs in the car. We would make up a song about our day and what was going to happen during our day. So I think that was sort of the musical equivalent of what you're doing with your children. I think that there's a creativity in that a lot of children are missing now. And a lot of parents use the iPad or the iPhone to babysit their kids, and there's not that personal interaction and that the physical interaction with the children. I worry about the next generation. And I also think that's why what you're doing is very important, because it gives people, all of your followers, from what I'm noticing, it gives them permission to reconnect with what's important in their lives. So just a couple of things. I'm curious, do you write, do you handwrite, or do you type on the computer when you're writing, or do you both? How do you do that? Let's talk workflow for a minute.
Yeah, the functional, the practical stuff. Yeah, a mix of both. Like,
yeah.
I grew up with notepads, and I have found, I'm sure you found as well, you get so used to typing that it actually hurts your hand when you write now. I can't write with a pen for extended periods of time. When I was like 16, 17, I had this thick moleskin type notebook, and I wrote an entire novel in it. I've still got it somewhere. I should be showing it. And there's no way I could write like that now. But I do write poetry and thoughts down in like a journal. I tend to take something with me everywhere. I'm not someone who likes to text. I can't work on my phone. I can't. I think my eyes are failing me, so I think that's part of the reason. But I'm not someone who can feel inspired or my thoughts flow when I'm typing or texting. So I do tend to use a notebook to get those initial thoughts down, but then the heavy editing that happens at the laptop.
Yeah, I had this picture of you because in a lot of your videos you're writing in a notebook, and I had this image in my mind of these poems being written and then things scratched out and new words in it, because you strike me as being somebody who searches for that perfect word, who searches for how to I mean, what's your creative process with this?
I would say I'm someone who's quite lyrical, so I like the sound of certain words. You know,
Mm.
I hear a poem when I'm writing it, and I'll hear the musicality of it. Sometimes poems will come fully formed, although it's very rare. Like sometimes I'll just sit there and I'll be able to write a poem from start to finish. Other times I'll have maybe like a line I really like or just a feeling, and I'll have to go back and refine it. A bit like you say, trying to dig deeper and find what that feeling, what that means, what that is. Because I think that emotions are these big, deep, abstract things, and that's why poetry is why art in general is beautiful, because it expands from that. You know, if I say I love someone and you say you love someone, okay, they sound the same, but they're going to be very different experiences. It's only when we can go to poetry and go, well, actually, it feels like the breaking of ice on a river, and that sounds maybe abstract, but at some point in your life, God, that makes sense. That is how it felt. That is what it meant. It did feel like that. And the same way when you listen to a song, you can just be struck, or at least like I think we need to be open to being astonished and being moved in that way. And for me, that's what I try to do when I write poetry. I try and just figure out, well, what is it? It isn't just a spade. It's not just a spade. It's these things, grief. What does it really look like if I dig under the surface? So from that, I would say that's my process, or my my attack on how I write a poem. But I think, like most great people, we don't really know. It just sort of happens. And you can sort of dress it up as something magical or very practical, but it's very hard to pinpoint the process. And
It is.
it's why it's so hard to teach, I think, creativity, because it's, I can look back
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago and my poetry is vastly different to what it is now. And it wasn't one thing. I didn't take a course and suddenly I could write the way I write now. And I'm sure I'll think the same in 10 years' time. I'll look back and go, why was I writing this way? It happens in some subconscious place through experience and through reading
Mm-hmm.
and exposure to art and other artists. Yeah.
I think I searched. I found some of your early work, and it was beautiful, but it was more literal than the work that you're doing now. The work that you're doing now does have more of that. I don't know how to describe it. You're better at words, this type of wording than I am, but I think that the way you describe physical objects or emotions is not as literal. It's not as literal as it was when you were younger, which I think shows your maturity as an artist, and also allows us to literally feel the emotion and see the emotion that you're describing in your poems in a way that I'm really admire what you do. I've made a living being much more literal. I write screenplays and things like that, and TV shows, and what seem like silly TV shows now when I look back on them, but people loved them. I'm chasing lightning for Nat Geo, but I think that we all need right now, and I'm encouraging everybody listening to read Sam's work. Go find poets that you love. I had the good fortune of meeting Maya Angelou, and
Wow.
You as creatives you're people. You are human beings, and you have this big heart, you have this big soul, and you have this big brain. And I think it takes a lot of courage for you, Sam, to write these things that are so personal and so they cut into you sometimes, right? Do you feel sometimes just cutting right into you? And I'm glad that you're no longer hiding that from us. I'm really excited about the book coming out. I do hope people buy it. And let me ask you another. I'm going to get off of my tangent for a moment and ask you, I'm curious about your videos and how you make your videos. We have some people who listen to the show that are technologists, and they're videographers and filmmakers and photographers and And then we have people who just listen because they love meeting new wonderful people. But for our producers out there, people that are making videos, how do you shoot your videos? Because they're really wonderful. Those have also matured over the years.
Yes, they have. Yeah, I got a better camera at some point as well. I mean, do you want to know the technical side of the process, or like what? Are you
Yeah,
first,
what camera do you shoot with, and are you who's shooting them with you, and how do you edit them? Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I shoot on a Canon R5. I've always used Canons, and that's come from the introduction of the Canon 5D Mark, or the first Canon 5D, which was used certainly in the UK with a lot of indie filmmakers, because all of a sudden you could achieve this cinematic feel that was exclusive to big budget production houses on relatively cheap or commercial cameras. So I've stuck with Canon from that point. I have a background in theatre and independent film. I've worked behind camera and in front of camera as well. So I use a Canon R5 at the moment. I tend to shoot in 4K. I would love to shoot on something like a Red, but it's way out of budget for the type of stuff I'm doing, and far too much horsepower to stick a 10-second poetry video on there. And then I edit and color grade in Premiere. I do really like DaVinci, but I tend to stick to my comforts and the things that I've been using for like a long period of time. Oh, and I shoot them all
think
myself.
editing has its own languages. You shoot them all yourself?
Yeah, I do at the moment. There's been one or two that I've had help with, but for the most part, I have to stand looking rather foolish in a field and pointing at the camera.
I was wondering if you had somebody else shooting for you, if it would distract you from the emotion that you're portraying with the work that you're saying, with the words that you're saying.
Yeah, I would love it if someone did it for me.
You would?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
well, I have lots of friends in.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think you're doing amazing work. So what do you personally think would be the biggest win for you in your life, looking back when you're 80 years old, as in one of the poems that you wrote? If you were looking back on your life, what would you like your legacy to be, to your children, to your family, to your friends?
For myself, it would have just been to that I lived authentically, and I did things that meant something to me. For my kids, that they saw me do that and realised that actually they don't have to give up their dreams. I have no expectations on them. If my sons want to be doctors, then they'll get my support. If they want to be poets, they'll get the same amount of support. If they want to be clowns, I'll be at every show, and I want them to know that that's what's important. Is that they pursue something that means something to them. In terms of my work, I'd like to leave a little legacy that I improved some people's lives, and maybe help them see that there is beauty everywhere, there is wonder, and that sometimes it is just a little triumphs. It is like you don't need to do these radical things or be these grand romantic heroes. That actually you're probably living a romantic life as it is. And there is romanticism there, and true poetry isn't someone like me coming up with absurd metaphors. It is those little moments. It is the post-its on the fridge. It is the tender moments that we often overlook. And I think if I can do that, if I can leave a little bit of that, then that's enough for me. I don't need to be world famous. I think I'd probably collapse and crumble with that much attention on me. So,
Well, you are going to have to protect yourself from some of that. I'm going to show you what I have on my desk here. This is actually the movie that I'm making is about war and veterans and the Purple Hearts. But this is my mantra. Can you read that? I'm not mirrored. It says pray for love.
Yeah.
I think we can pray for peace, but I don't know that we'll ever accomplish that. But if we pray for love, then I think we'll make some progress in the world. And I think that you do that. You do that every time I read some of your work. Is there anything you want to say to our audience before we sign off? And
write poetry. I got a lot of people ask, almost like they're asking for permission of, I've wanted to write, but I don't know where to start, and just start. There are schools of thought and places you can go to learn to be technical, but I don't think that's important at all. I think begin writing, and read and seek out art, because it's powerful, and that's where we find our meaning.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so my book is called An Anthem for the Dreaming Lost, and it's a collection of poetry that covers grief, loss, brotherhood, wonder, romance, existentialism, and the human imagination, and a journey through life. And it can be found on Amazon globally.
That's wonderful. I will look for it. Well, he's Samuel Hurley, goes by Sam. I'm Cirina Catania. You've been listening to OWC Radio. And remember what I tell you every time: get up off your chairs and go do something wonderful today. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.